The first time Elena Cross mocked Daniel Hayes, she didn't even bother to look at his face. She was standing in the glass-walled engine bay of Cross Dynamics, the largest electric transport company in the state, heels clicking sharply against the polished concrete, surrounded by executives who nodded at everything she said as if it were law. The prototype engine in front of her had failed again, smoke curling, alarms screaming, millions of dollars bleeding away by the second, and Elena, the youngest CEO in the company's history, was furious. Her patience had already been shredded by sleepless nights, hostile board meetings, and a press countdown announcing that if this engine didn't work by morning, her reign as CEO would likely end. That's when someone mentioned the single dad mechanic from maintenance. Elena laughed, sharp and dismissive, the kind of laugh that silences rooms. When Daniel stepped forward, oil-stained hands, worn boots, a face marked by exhaustion that came from raising a child alone and working double shifts, Elena finally looked at him, and what she saw confirmed every bias she carried. Poor. Invisible. Replaceable. You, she said, her voice slicing through the room. You think you can fix what my engineers couldn't? The executives shifted uncomfortably, but no one defended him. Daniel didn't flinch. He had learned long ago that dignity didn't come from how others spoke to you, but from how you stood when they did. I'd like to try, he said calmly. Elena scoffed, crossing her arms. Then, half joking, half cruel, she said the words that would haunt her forever, fine. Fix this engine, and I'll marry you. Laughter rippled through the room. Cameras from the internal media team caught everything. Daniel didn't laugh. He only nodded once, quietly, because somewhere deep inside him, this wasn't about her insult. This was about keeping his job, about buying asthma medicine for his 6-year-old daughter Lily, about proving, if only to himself, that he was more than the world kept telling him he was. As the room emptied, Elena leaned toward her assistant and muttered, "Give him an hour. Then escort him out." What Elena didn't know was that Daniel hadn't always been just maintenance. Years earlier, before his wife died in a late-night crash and his life collapsed into survival mode, Daniel had been a prodigy, an engineer whose designs had been quietly shelved, stolen, and forgotten when he chose family over fame. He knelt beside the engine now, listening, not just to the sound, but to the rhythm of it, the way a doctor listens to a heartbeat. His mind traced patterns others missed. 30 minutes passed. Then 45. A guard was already walking toward him when the engine hummed. Not sputtered. Not struggled. Hummed, smooth, stable, alive. Screens flickered. Data stabilized. One by one, alarms went silent. The guard froze. Engineers rushed back in disbelief. Elena returned, annoyance on her face, until she saw the readings. "What did you do?" she demanded. Daniel stood slowly, wiping his hands. "I fixed the flaw in the energy loop," he said simply. It wasn't mechanical. It was pride. Everyone was forcing it to work instead of letting it flow. The room fell quiet. For the first time, Elena felt something unfamiliar twist in her chest, not attraction, not guilt, but fear. Because this man she had mocked had just saved her company in under an hour. She forced a smile, professional and cold. "Congratulations," she said. "You did your job." Daniel looked at her then, really looked at her, and said something she didn't expect. "You should be careful what you joke about," he said softly. "Some promises change lives." That night, the video of Elena's words leaked online. The caption went viral: "CEO mocks single dad, karma works overtime." Millions watched. Comments exploded. And at home, Lily sat on the couch beside her father, holding his hand, whispering, "Daddy, why was that lady so mean to you?" Daniel kissed her forehead and said the only thing he ever taught her to believe, because she doesn't know our story yet. What neither of them knew was that by morning, Elena Cross's entire world, her company, her power, her future, would collide with Daniel's in a way no one could undo. And if you're wondering what happens when pride meets quiet strength, when cruelty meets integrity, and when a mockery turns into destiny, make sure you subscribe to this channel, because Chapter 2 doesn't just end this story, it changes everything. By sunrise, Elena Cross was no longer the untouchable CEO the world feared, she was a headline. The leaked clip had spread faster than wildfire, replayed on morning shows, dissected on podcasts, and weaponized across social media. Arrogant CEO humiliates single father, one banner read. Another asked, is this the true face of corporate power? Elena stood alone in her penthouse kitchen, staring at her phone as her PR team's messages piled up, each more frantic than the last. All it takes to change how you see your own life. What people never tell you about ultimatums is that they don't end when a choice is spoken, they echo, long after the room empties, long after everyone believes the moment has passed. After I said those 3 reckless words, nothing truly stopped, it only began moving faster, more dangerously. My boss was the first to regain control. She didn't shout, didn't threaten, didn't fire me on the spot like every dramatic instinct suggested she would. Instead, she smiled, slow, deliberate, terrifying. It was the smile of someone who had spent her life turning chaos into leverage. She dismissed my girlfriend with a polite nod, calling it a private conversation, and for a second I thought I'd lost everything. But my girlfriend didn't leave quietly. She stood, walked toward me, and whispered, whatever happens next, remember, you taught me how to believe in you. Then she walked out, not defeated, but done. The door closing behind her sounded heavier than any punch. My boss circled me like a strategist assessing damage. She told me power doesn't share space with indecision, that ambition demands sacrifice, that emotions are luxuries men like me only think we can afford. And that's when it hit me, the irony. She thought she owned the future, but she was terrified of being alone in it. I told her I wasn't asking permission anymore. I wasn't choosing secrecy or convenience. I was choosing honesty, even if it cost me her favor, her protection, her influence. For the first time, her composure cracked. Not loudly, just enough for me to see the woman behind the title. She admitted she envied the kind of love my girlfriend represented, the kind that existed before success rewrote your soul. And then she did something no one expected, she let me walk out without consequences. No threats. No warnings. Just a quiet understanding that control had limits. I found my girlfriend hours later, sitting alone, strength holding her upright while grief tried to pull her under. I didn't beg. I didn't promise perfection. I told her the truth, every ugly part of it. That I was weak. That I was tempted. That I was done lying. Trust doesn't return like a switch flipping on, it crawls back, wounded and cautious. She didn't forgive me that night. She didn't forgive me the next week either. But she stayed. And staying, I learned, is louder than forgiveness. Months passed. I left the company. I rebuilt my career without shortcuts. My boss remained a powerful name in the industry, and sometimes our paths crossed in silence heavy with things unsaid. My girlfriend and I rebuilt slowly, arguments, honesty, uncomfortable growth. No fantasy ending. Just a real one. And now, when I look back at that moment, the ultimatum, the arrogance, the impossible choice, I understand something clearly. The bravest thing I ever did wasn't trying to keep both worlds. It was finally refusing to live a double life. If this chapter made you feel something, anger, hope, reflection, subscribe to the channel. These stories aren't about perfect people. They're about real choices, real consequences, and the courage it takes to face yourself when everything is on the line. More powerful stories are coming, and you won't want to miss them.